Hello, everyone, and welcome to another video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and I've got Notre Dame superfan James Schneider with me. Obviously, you've seen the title of this video, How to Fix the College Football Playoff. James, unfortunately, your band of Irish were on the wrong side of some of the committee rules. Before we get into what we would change, what this college football playoffs going to look like, what were your thoughts when you saw Miami grab that last spot instead of the Fighting Irish?
Well, Sean, I knew our fate was sealed when I saw Alabama grab that 9 seed. I was shocked and appalled at the decision, to say the least. Miami, as much as I think Notre Dame is the better team, they played better down the stretch. I am okay with the committee putting them in, but the fact that a three-loss Alabama team that lost two of their last four games and looked horrible against Georgia in the SEC championship. It blew my mind. I know Notre Dame was sitting on the couch that week, but they still had more rushing yards than Alabama did in that game. So the
That's true.
the fact that the committee put them in there ahead of them, I really don't get it. I know that Alabama is obviously a huge brand, and from the financial side of it, it makes sense to have such a big team in there, but Notre Dame is also a big brand, and I think they would impact it the same way that Alabama would. So yeah, I felt I was hurt and betrayed that they left Notre Dame out for for Alabama. Miami, a little salty because I think Notre Dame's the better team, but if they want to go with the head-to-head, that's fine. But I do not like the way that the committee dangled the playoffs in front of Notre Dame for all those weeks, starting from November 4th, I believe it was. Notre Dame was ranked ahead of Miami every single week, and Notre Dame took care of business. Miami lost to two unranked opponents in that span, and I, like I said, I understand if you want to go head to head, and if you had them, Miami ranked ahead of Notre Dame the entire time, that's fine. But the way they went about it, saying that Notre Dame was in the playoffs and then to switch it last second was, um, it was a cheap shot for sure.
Yeah,
I didn't like it.
the the Tuesday shows there's gonna be a change in that in my scenario, but yeah, they sort of boxed themselves into the corner here with Alabama. And had they taken Alabama out, I think that would have been the death of conference championship games. And you just when it in college football, there's so rarely like an actual data point to compare the two teams, and when you have a head to head, even though it was in week one, you have to honor that. But on the same hand, James, Alabama had the worst loss of any team even near the playoff in week one. Um, but at the same time, like they couldn't just jettison the SEC championship game because that would have been the end of that. But if we didn't have a Tuesday ranking show, if we didn't know where the committee had them, then they easily could have just left Alabama out and said, you know what, Notre Dame and Miami were already higher than Alabama, so Alabama's out. But that will be one of the major changes in my scenario. Other things, we had Ohio State only dropping to number two after losing in the Big Ten championship to Indiana. It was kind of a prevailing theory there that the Big Ten would have one and three, and Georgia would be two. Don't think it really means a whole lot in the end, but were you a little bit surprised to see Ohio State just dropping to number two?
I was. I do think that Ohio State's a good team, but I was very shocked because I think you have to put a team as good as Georgia in that two spot. I think Georgia was probably a little hurt that a non-conference championship winner is ahead of them when they played great all year and won the SEC championship. I think they should absolutely be offended by that. I think, honestly, even Texas Tech has an argument for the three over if I were to put Georgia two, Ohio State in question. I think Texas Tech could have been that three seed over Ohio State, dropping Ohio State to four. Yeah, I was interested. I was really interested to see how that went or how that went down. But Ohio State's a good team. You have to respect them. National champions last year. Um, Obviously, Jeremiah Smith, one of the best players in college football. Second best player named Jeremiah, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, two is very interesting to me. I think you have to put the SEC champion at two. And then say what you want about the Big 12, but Texas Tech has looked great this year. I would put them three, and Ohio State probably four.
And in the the home teams in the first round, Oregon 5, not surprising. Ole Miss 6, Texas A&M 7, not surprising in the fact that we saw it the week earlier, and then both teams didn't play, so there's no reason to flip them. But in the eight, like they want to avoid rematches, James, and they had two of them. They have two of them in the first round, and they would have had a third if Notre Dame was 10th. So I think that was a bad sign for Notre Dame, that the fact that Ole Miss was still 6, because we know Tulane was going to be 11. They had one rematch. I don't think they wanted three rematches in the first round, but that is supposed to be something that they were trying to avoid, and clearly they did not. Oklahoma did play Alabama already once this year, and Ole Miss beat Tulane by 35 already this year. But with the whole Ole Miss situation, James, didn't seem like the committee has punished them at all for losing their head coach. And that is not something that we have seen them do in the past when it comes to inavailability from certain players. But for the home teams in this first round, I don't think there were many shocks there.
No, and actually talking about Ole Miss, this might be a controversial opinion. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but if I were on that committee, I would have left Ole Miss out. As good as they are, I think that with all the change of, and of course, this is nothing against the players, like they're a great team, like 11 and 1, like it's not all coaching, but at the end of the day, when you have a great coach like Lane Kiffin and he leaves right before the playoffs, we're not going to see this Ole Miss team make a deep run. And if they prove me wrong, they prove me wrong. But I do not think that this Ole Miss team without their head coach is better than a Notre Dame or a BYU maybe or a Vanderbilt. I would like to have seen one of those teams because I think one of those three teams that I just mentioned could potentially make a deeper run. I don't see Ole Miss going past Georgia. Obviously, they beat Tulane earlier in the year by a lot, but that was with Lane Kiffin, so things should be a little different this time. But I don't know. I I, I do think they're a great team, but it'll be interesting to see how they play without their head coach.
And Oklahoma at 8, Alabama 9, as we mentioned earlier. That is a rematch from earlier, one of Alabama's three losses. And that may actually that was at in Tuscaloosa, so Oklahoma gets a chance to play in Norman, and then at the end of the college football playoff with our fourth and fifth conference champions, we have Tulane from the American and James Madison from the Sun Belt. No ACC champion, but we do have an ACC at large in Miami. James, probably the biggest talking point in the aftermath of the bracket release has been the conference champion conversation, and we have some people in the media talking for the complete expulsion of the group of five. And I think this year was a little bit of a funky scenario with Duke winning the ACC despite being like the fourth or fifth best team in that league. But what are your thoughts on this format, the rules, and how both Tulane and James Madison were able to get into this playoff?
Yeah, I like the idea of having a group of five team in just to spice things up. I feel like if there was no rule for that, they would constantly get disrespected. And I'm not saying that they're a top 12 team this year because I don't think either of them are, but it is nice to see a kind of a wild card team make it. However, I do think they need to get rid of the five conference champion requirements because we have a situation like this. And I think that this is not really something that they planned on when they made these rules initially, having two lower tier teams make it. But yeah, when you have a conference champion like Duke at 7-5, or maybe they finished 8-5 after the championship,
Yeah.
um, it's just not a team you want to see in the playoffs. But at the same time, it's like Duke played a better schedule than JMU or even Tulane. Like I think Duke would probably
Well,
give.
Tulane beat Duke by 20. So I think the Tulane thing needs to be uh, a little bit like Tulane probably deserves to be there. Like they're probably the 17th or 18th best team in the country, and if they were the 12th seed, I don't think anybody really cared. But JMU and Tulane, that's where a lot of people have some issues. So James, let's get into our scenarios now. You can go as in depth into this as you want. We don't know what the other person's scenario is, so you're just gonna have to visualize it with us here on the screen. But there'll be a post going out. I'll go first, James. I will be expanding the college football playoff by one spot to
Interesting.
13 teams. So that would create a can't see my cursor. Let me change that. All right, that would create another game here. The 12 versus the 13. I will have that being played on the week after conference championship week, immediately in the aftermath of the Army Navy game. If Army or Navy are in the top 5 conference champions, which I will be keeping, they just don't have to play in that play-in game. They'll be at the 11 seed or worse. Probably won't happen, but last year, Army was their conference champion. Navy only didn't play in that game because of a tiebreaker this year. So I'll be expanding the playoff by one game and adding a play-in game for the 12 and 13 seeds. But James, early thoughts on my plan?
I like it. I think there definitely needs to be a way to get the best teams in, and I think adding one more game certainly does that. Especially because, and I'll get to it when I discuss my scenario, but there are so many teams that will always be on the bubble, and there will always be controversy
Yep.
with this playoffs. And I think that alleviates some of the stress from the committee, and overall, I think it'll be better for the fans to give their team, if they're on the bubble, another chance to get in. So I think it for sure makes sense to sort of alleviate that stress. And I mean, at the end of the day, we want to see the best teams in, and I think that definitely helps that.
And I will also be going a little bit behind here to conference championships. The ACC needs to amend their tiebreakers. All the conferences need to amend their tiebreakers. Um, if the teams are tied in the standings, there needs to be some kind of computer formula, which what the Mountain West does to have. You want to have the two best teams in the conference championship game, and ideally you'd have smaller conferences, but the cat's out of the bag there. Like it's not going backwards. So have the two best teams in your conference championship game, so you don't have this happen again. But the American Conference did college football playoff rank as a tiebreaker, and that's why it was Tulane and North Texas versus a Navy getting in there. Mountain West used a computer formula, but the AC this would have been so much easier for the committee if
Miami
Miami
was in the
played
ACC
Virginia
championship.
and then Notre Dame takes the at-large spot, ACC champion takes the 11th spot. Because if they were both in, I don't think people would have cared if Miami was one spot behind Notre Dame, even though they played. But yeah, that really would make things a lot easier if you can actually have the two best teams playing. It happened in the Big Ten. It happened in the Big 12. SEC, I don't really think we know who the second best team is. They obviously have 5 in the 12, but at least the best team and then one of the 2, 3, or 4 or 5 teams were in it. It really just didn't work for the ACC. That conference is huge, and the gap in talent there is really big. So I'm amending the conference tiebreakers to avoid a situation like we had this year. And then after that, James, I think that's really it. I'm sticking with campus sites for the first 2 rounds. I'm sticking with the bowls from the quarterfinals on. And yeah, I mean, I might be pushing the Rose Bowl to. Well, the Rose Bowl has to be on New Year's Day, right? So it would have to be in this quarterfinal round still. But yeah, that's really it for my changes. And of course, it's hard to tell how many teams really deserve to be in the playoff before the year. Like last year, if there was an 8-team playoff, I think people would have been okay with that. Teams 9, 10, 11, and 12 all got smoked in the games. It was an average of 20 points. The closest game was between me and you, James. It was a 10-point win for Notre Dame over Indiana, and that was one where that was, garbage time made that look a lot closer. But I'm expanding it to 13. I'm changing conference tiebreakers, and I'm just adding another game the week before. That's really it. But what about your scenario?
So I'm trying to visualize this here, and I'm taking inspiration from the NBA playoffs and how they do the play-in bracket now. Because I'm thinking of all these teams that are on the bubble, and I'm thinking, as much as I was bashing the conference champion auto bids, I think we reduce it to three from five. I think those top three conference champions get the first round bye. I don't know exactly what I want to do with that fourth first round bye, but I like the idea of um, say anywhere from the 10 seed to the first four teams on the bubble, maybe. Like
Yeah.
if for this year we had, say, even like going maybe even the 9 seed, because like Alabama, Miami, and Notre Dame, that was the conversation, which two were gonna get in.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have teams like BYU, Vanderbilt, Texas, all sitting there that could make a deep run in this playoff. I would have loved to see the teams like them that were on their couches on conference champion weekend make the case for the playoffs by playing each other.
That's a good point. I also want to add that to my scenario. Um, an open invitation to play in in conference championship week if you're not in the conference championship, because that means there's no advantage for resting. Um, and I think if at the beginning of the year you could say you could schedule another game conference championship week, then the teams, like this year Vanderbilt tried it and they didn't get people to say yes. But if you were like Alabama or Miami or Oklahoma and you are already in, like why would you do that? But if everybody's doing it, then you would want to do it too. It would create some more interesting games and sort of be a play-in of sorts, even if it's not on the bracket.
Yeah, and I don't think it would be hard from like an athletic department standpoint because that's actually what I do for work. Um,
I mean,
all you have to
it
do
would
is
be it would
know
be
at least
tight,
it would be
but
tight, but all you have to do, at least, I mean, I'm speaking from a D3 perspective, a lot different than these big D1 programs, but um, it's definitely feasible within like I mean it would be tough because you don't know who exactly it would be, but if push came to shove, you can get it done
like
for sure.
Vanderbilt wanted to do it and could have done it. But nobody, and the rules are you can't really do one in the United States. You'd have to go to Hawaii or Puerto Rico or something. Let's get rid of that rule. Let's get rid of the Tuesday college football playoff pre-shows. If teams don't know where they are, they'd be way more likely to play another game just to be sure.
Yep.
Like Notre Dame probably didn't want to play another game because they probably thought they were okay. But if they were forced to do it, and we had a Notre Dame Miami rematch, for example, and Notre Dame won, like that fixes that problem. But yeah, like protect. Like, it's not really a play-in, but it would sort of be a play-in. It would be a play-in that's not on the bracket. And of course, the
Yeah.
committee would have to. That's a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would work, and I think it would be tough with like as we were talking about before the playoff bracket actually came out, how FanDuel released their odds, of course, as they would. But Notre Dame was minus 3,500, huge favorite to make the playoff, and then they're out. So it would be tough because if Notre Dame was like, okay, we're like this favorite to make it, maybe they wouldn't be incentivized to
Yeah.
schedule a team like Miami in a rematch or Alabama or whatever. But I think it would make things so interesting and would make the decision for the committee a whole lot easier if it
And
was as cut and dry as that last week, with like results in hand. I think it would cause so much less controversy, and no one would really be able to argue at the end of the day if If Notre Dame rematched Miami and Miami punked them, no one would really argue that Miami was in over Notre Dame. So I think I think it would be really fun to see that because we would get so many more better games, which is what everyone wants to see.
So you would leave it at 12, have only 3 auto bids, they all get buys, but have this sort of I don't want to call it fake playing, but it's like an extra week basically of data knowing where you're at, because like the number one criticism when it comes to schedules is you make these things years in advance, and the conference gives you a number of teams that you can't control. But Notre Dame does schedule all of their games, but still, they're years in advance. Next year, the 3 Big Ten teams on their schedule were all good when Notre Dame scheduled them, and they're all terrible right now. So that would sort of alleviate that problem too, right? If you don't have a big team on your schedule, maybe we have conference slots at certain games in conference championship week. Like there's the Big Ten championship, and then there's the, you know, Big Ten SEC playoff in Detroit and the Big 12 ACC playoff in New Orleans or something like that. They wouldn't have to call them that, of course, but that's a pretty good idea, I think. And in terms of getting to 12, I think it would be a little bit easier for the committee to see these teams face up against each other essentially right before they make the selections. But
Yeah,
once you
and
get to the 12, are there any changes you're making?
I don't think so. The only thing I'm trying to think of is the buys. Like I know like it's just hard because this year the ACC was so weak and we saw a really um like their champion didn't make the playoffs. So it's like I want to give like a fourth conference champion a bye, but
Yeah, that would have been Tulane this year.
yeah, after this year, I don't think you can. I think the Big Ten's always going to put out a quality team. SEC is always going to put out a quality team. Honestly, the Big 12 is always going to be like a hit or miss too, with the departure of Texas and Oklahoma in recent years. I don't know. I don't know. It's so hard. Like the fact that they redid the football playoff format in these recent years, because something's always going to
Yeah.
spark a conversation. But I think if I were to implement this, I would start with three, see what happens, and then go from there. Which is, I guess that's what their game plan is too, because they're always going to be making these changes.
Would they be given the top 3 slots, or do they just have to be in the top 4 in your scenario?
Uh, they would be given that's a good question. I think they would just have to be in the top four
Yeah.
because they're getting a bye regardless. But say like hypothetically this year, like a good SEC team was Texas A&M. They were not in the SEC championship. If they, in my scenario, played a team like Alabama, no, Alabama's in the. If they
Utah?
played, not Utah, like if they were on the bubble, not that they were, but if they decided to play a playing game because incentive for them is right now, obviously they don't have a first round bye, but if they say scheduled BYU, no, BYU is
They were in the
conference
conference
champion.
championship.
All
Yeah.
right, so
It'd be
if
like Utah, Texas, Vanderbilt, Michigan, USC. That would have to be where they would go.
yeah, if Texas A&M, because I don't want to say a rematch with Notre Dame, but yeah, if they did they play Vanderbilt this year?
Probably not, because I think they played the entire bottom half of the SEC, and then they played Texas and then lost. So you would
Okay,
think
so
no.
if they said to Vanderbilt, all right, let's play right now, not that they would because they're probably a locked in playoff team, but say they wanted to go for that last buy spot, they could. That would be an incentive for them. I don't think it makes sense from their point of view. I was just saying, like, in a scenario where a team is set to play in the first round, they could play their way into a bye with my scenario.
And when you go back to the top 3 thing, if it had been, you would have to think that Team 4 will probably be from the conference that Team number 1 is from. So if it lined up that way this year and it was the top 3 and then Ohio State 4, you would have had all 3 Big Ten teams in 1, 4, and 5. They would have been all next to each other. Um, and I know they don't really care about that once you get to the college football playoff, but like Indiana's already played those two teams. Like, it's probably best to separate the conference opponents when possible. And now I know, of course, we have an SEC game in round one, and very likely to have an SEC game in the quarterfinals. But I think this is like there is really no predicting at this point like what the playoffs look like next year. And I think
Right.
that with the fact that 15 or 16 teams were probably worthy of a selection this year, there's a good chance it just goes to 16. And it's just straight up one versus 16, March Madness style. Um, but last year, we'll wrap it up with this, James. Last year, you had sort of teams that were significantly not like horrible football teams, but they were never going to win um, more than a game, and they ultimately ended up all getting crushed in the first round, like I said earlier. But I think it's unfair to really compare across the years because I think this year's Vanderbilt gets in last year relatively easy, and it's all those SEC teams had 3 losses last year. Alabama, Ole Miss. This year, Texas was really the only pre-conference championship team with 3 losses that was even considered, and that's because they played Ohio State and they beat Texas A&M. But like, it's just you have no way of knowing how good the 12th best team is, and this year it was way better than last year, and next year it could be all that different. But if you had to guess, let's wrap it up with this. If you had to guess, what do you think the playoffs looks like? I guess we'll call it in the 26-27 season.
Oh, I mean, I think if you do expand to 16, it sort of gets a little more cut and dry as because who finished the season at 17 this year? USC was
USC
18. They were 17. Okay.
or Tulane
You,
was 17, I think, but
okay.
they would
I
be they
think
would be in anyway. So you'd have to go
yeah.
up then. So I think so if they expanded 4, right, you'd think it'd be Notre Dame, BYU, Texas, and Vanderbilt. So Utah would probably be the first team out.
Yeah, and I don't think there would be really any complaints about
Yeah.
that Utah team not making it. So I think it gets more cut and dry at that point because 16 is a lot of teams. I know people weren't happy when it went from 4 to 12, but I think I mean I don't I guess I don't speak for everyone when I say this, but I want to see more high level games.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that people were because I was a big fan of going from 4 to 12. Um and I'm surprised that people were against it, but I would like to see a 16 team playoff and 2026 27 might be a little too soon for that, but with um like the outrage this year um and then um outrage in years prior, I could see them making drastic changes in the
Yeah,
near future because at the end of the day they want what's best for them, which is to make more money. So,
I think the next year will probably be 12, and they'll tweak a few conference championship things, and then I think they'll probably go to 16 after that. But there's a different amount of teams that deserve it every year. Like if you go back to the last 4 team year where Florida State was left out, like there's probably like an 8 team playoff
and
that
that
year,
Georgia team was left
and that
out
Georgia
too.
team was good, and Ohio State was left out with just the Michigan loss. So that, like, if that was an 8 team playoff that year, that would have been so cool.
Oh,
And
for sure.
you don't even think about what a 12 team playoff would have looked like that year, and would it have been great? Who knows? And then last year, I think was just sort of unfortunate with the conference champions getting the buys. They tweaked that, so I think this is year one of this exact format. So I think we need to let it play out first before people go on and make rash. 20 like Fox is pushing this 2014 playoff. That would be too much. Like if you lose four
Yeah.
games, you do not deserve a chance to play for the national championship. Um,
No, and I think things are really going to depend on once we see that first real big upset.
yeah,
Like you mentioned last year, all the top seeds got crushed, or all the lower seeds
and
got
then they
crushed.
all won again in the next round.
Yes.
Um,
So I think until we see sort of. I don't think there will ever be like a Cinderella run in football. It's just different from basketball in that sense. But until we see a team like if JMU beats the brakes off Oregon, I don't know what they're gonna do because
Yeah,
I
that would
think,
shut a lot of people up real quick, wouldn't it? Yeah,
yeah,
and I think that it is different from basketball, and that's not the worst thing. Like there have been group of five teams that have been really good over the years. We go back to the self-proclaimed national champion UCF Knights. That team would have belonged in a 12-team playoff. And then you have Boise State last year. You have Cincinnati when Sauce Gardner was there, and the 4-team playoff didn't go so well for them, but they could have won a game. So I think that they're not totally going to shun the group of five out. I think they'll tweak some conference champion requirements so that this doesn't happen again. I think the American Conference, you look at pretty much every big job except for LSU was filled from that league. Like you had Golish to Auburn, you had Morris go from North Texas to Oklahoma State, you had Sumrall to Florida. Like they all went up, so that's a pretty good league. I don't think it matters that they are, the American probably deserves a spot in the near future, but I think we'll see a little bit of tweaking next year with the tiebreakers, and then the year after next, maybe we'll see a bigger playoff, but we'll have to see when that comes. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We're going to end it here, and we'll see you next time.